around the country.
We are a country that is headed towards socialism, totalitarianism, beyond your wildest imagination. I wanted to debunk these FEMA camps. Well, we've now for several days done research on them. I can't debunk them.
Can you imagine?
Hey everybody, greetings and blessings to all of you, and thanks for joining in my video today. I'm going to think for a moment about events that happen in our lives, events that collectively catch the attention and the hearts and minds and souls of our entire nation. Some of these could be joyful events. The United States miracle on ice when in 1980 in Lake Placid, the U.S. hockey team won the gold medal, and the whole country seemed to be captured by that. And when I was young in 1969 in that July, and they showed the Neil Armstrong, the first man, stepping out of the spacecraft to walk on the moon, and the entire country was glued to their TV sets for that event. And those were reasons for celebration. But a lot of events are not happy events. And if I just go backwards, starting from now, working back through my life, and name a few of these, all of you would remember September 11th, 2001, what we've come to know as 9/11. I really don't need to say much more about that. I mean, most everyone will remember where they were when that happened. And a couple of years before that, on April 20th of 1999, there was the Columbine shooting, which caught a lot of attention. And there have been worse shootings since then, and even though that wasn't the worst, I think it's because it was the first, and it kind of shocked our country. Let's go back to another event that happened the day before my birthday on January 28th, 1986, and that was the Challenger explosion, and it caught our attention. Because up until that point, we really hadn't had a major disaster with our space program, and this showed a huge vulnerability, and what until that point we maybe considered ourselves not very vulnerable. Caught our attention. The country was in shock. Then I go back to when I was in 8th grade in 1968, and April 4th and June 5th, a couple months apart, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, and then Robert Kennedy was assassinated. So these events, we remember them in our lives. The earliest one that I recall, and probably the biggest one, was when I was a little third grader sitting there, 8 years old. It was November 22nd of 1963 when the announcement came on the PA, President Kennedy had been shot. And it's like, oh man. And then a few minutes later, they announced that he had died, and basically the president has died. School is dismissed right now, go home, and they just sent us home. And since it was a neighborhood and we all walked to school, we just went home. No one had to call our parents to pick us up or get buses there. That was a hard weekend. I watched everything on TV, the whole thing. I was watching live when Lee Harvey Oswald, the supposedly shooter, was actually being taken out of jail to be moved, and another man, Jack Ruby, just walked right in and blew his brains out. In the Kennedy situation, they came out with a Warren report. It took a few years to put this huge document together, and basically the conclusion was, Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. There was nothing else to it. Just, what you see is what you get, and more importantly, what we say is what you get. And by 1967, they estimated that maybe 80% of the people in the country didn't believe it. They didn't believe the Warren Commission report. There was all kinds of talk about it was other shooters involved. They talked about a grassy knoll where shots were fired from the opposite direction in the book depository where Oswald was. They showed films that Kennedy's head actually snapped backward, even though Oswald would have shot him from behind and made his head move forward. So this was just going all over the place, that the government was covering up and hiding things. And so CIA had a strategy, and what they did is they came out with a term which they really pushed, and the term was conspiracy theory. It was probably around before the Warren Commission. It was probably around before the CIA it existed, but really to push that term out and widely use it, and it became a good strategy. Anything that would go against the official narrative that the government wanted you to believe would be labeled as a conspiracy theory. Now they did this kind of like in the background with, the government didn't officially say, we will now officially call this conspiracy theory. No, they kind of started people saying it, and this strategy continues even until now. So you may have noticed the shirt I'm wearing, which says Noah was a conspiracy theorist, then it rained, from Luke 17:26, and that's where Jesus said that so it shall be as in the days of Noah. And what happened in the days of Noah, for those who aren't sure, we've, even as little kids in school and church and stuff, we'd heard Noah built the ark and took the animals and then the flood came. But what really happened? Well, God told Noah to build the ark, and he gave him a lot of time, advance notice, because it took time to build this ark. And Noah's out there building this ark, and people are looking at it saying, what in the world are you building? So Noah told him, I'm building this huge ship because there's going to be a flood. You need to be prepared. There's going to be a flood. And this is out in the middle of a desert where it probably hadn't rained in years, dry as a bone. And so what did they say? Oh, you're crazy, old man. You're out of your mind. They ridiculed him. They ignored him. No one believed him. Even his own family members doubted him. And then it rained, okay? And so it is now. As we can apply this to our time, we see that this is a really time when things will be happening that might be change our world completely in a way that we would have never imagined, and in a way that we might have to have a hard time surviving in these next little times. And so what do? We could rewrite, Jesus' message as this, because he said, Jesus' message was, in the days of Noah, people were eating, drinking, partying, getting married, right up until the day of the flood. And we could say right now, people are out there watching ball games, going to happy hours, just enjoying their TV shows, and, just enjoying life. And it will be so right until the SHTF, okay? And so, the ones who really have an idea of what's coming, we want to tell people, but who's listening? So anyway, so the conspiracy theory originated with the CIA, okay? The whole idea, they put that out as a strategy, okay? Well, about a year ago I read this. It was a question. It said, what's the difference between a conspiracy theory and a fact? And the answer at that time, it was about 6 months. And I think it was Don Jr. put this out about a year ago. Well, that was a year ago. Right now, I would dare say it might be more like 6 weeks, 6 days. And as the recent passing of the Queen, it didn't take even 6 hours that the whole social media was full of commentary on the quote truth, behind what the Queen and oh my God, even worse, King Charles and all the things they're involved in that are really not good. And so, it's not taking long for people to start just questioning now. A few years back, most of the people, if something was called a conspiracy theory, most people would just believe that it was probably false. Oh, it's a conspiracy theory, it's probably false. But now, in kind of a pushback, we're in a point where if something is labeled a conspiracy theory, many people will just say, oh, it must be true. It's a conspiracy theory. It's something they're hiding. It must be true. So let's remember this. Conspiracies do exist. Theories can be true or they can be false. And so you have to be real careful in just jumping to a conclusion that just because it's a conspiracy theory it's false, or just because it's a conspiracy theory it's true, and just examine each thing for what it is, okay? And so, with that, I'm going to look at a conspiracy theory. I won't reveal it right now. I'll start by introducing it with the book of Genesis right at the very beginning, okay?
If I'm gonna believe in her, I might as well believe in flat earth. I might as well believe in flat earth. I might as well believe in flat earth. I might as well believe in flat earth.
Now I'd like to read from the first chapter of the book of Genesis, and as I read, I'll put the text on the screen, and you will see that I've taken the word dome and put it in green, and next to it I put a little number keeping track of how many times during these first few verses of the first chapter that word actually appears. So let's begin the story of creation. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was without form or shape, with darkness over the abyss, and a mighty wind sweeping over the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good. God then separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. Evening came, and morning followed, the first day. When God said, "Let there be light," you may think this was the sun. But when we go to verse 16, we read about the sun and moon being created. So what is this light and darkness, this day and night that's mentioned in verses 4 and 5, even before the sun or the moon have been brought into creation? We'll continue reading. Then God said, "Let there be a dome in the middle of the waters to separate one body of water from another." And God made the dome and separated the waters below the dome from the waters above the dome. And so it happened. God called the dome sky. Evening came and morning followed, the second day. What is the dome that separates the waters above from the water below? When I was young, I would hear this reading in church. I thought maybe the dome was like the land kind of coming up out of the ocean and separating it into like the continents and the water in between. When we get to verses 9 and 10, we'll read about the lands being formed to divide the water into basins. Okay, so what does this dome mention in verse 6? Continuing reading, then God said, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered into a single basin, so that the dry land may appear." And so it happened. The water under the sky was gathered into its basin, and the dry land appeared. God called the dry land earth, and the basin of water he called sea. God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the earth bring forth vegetation, every kind of plant that bears seed, and every kind of fruit tree on earth that bears fruit with its seed." God saw that it was good. Evening came and morning followed, the third day. So now we have a dome holding back some water outside of the dome, and some land masses formed in the water below the dome. Vegetation is put on the land, but so far, no mention of the sun and moon. Well, stay tuned. We are going to hear more about the dome as we continue through the book of Genesis. Then God said, "Let there be lights in the dome of the sky to separate day from night. Let them mark the seasons, the days and years, and serve as lights in the dome of the sky to illuminate the earth." And so it happened. God made the two great lights, the greater one to govern the day and the lesser one to govern the night and the stars. God set them in the dome of the sky to illuminate the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. God saw that it was good. Evening came and morning followed, the fourth day. So we see that the dome mentioned 3 more times. Why such importance placed on the dome? As we continue reading, we have yet one more mention of this dome. Then God said, "Let the waters teem with an abundance of living creatures, and on the earth let birds fly beneath the dome of the sky." Evening came and morning followed the 5th day. Could anyone actually believe that we are living under a dome rather than on a sphere that is moving around in space? There are people who believe this. The theory is known as flat earth theory. And as you might expect, flat earth theory is called a conspiracy theory. But let's look at flat earth theory. At first it seems ridiculous. But the first chapter in Genesis motivated me to look more closely at this theory. Some claim that the earth is a flat disk under a dome. To me, this does not make sense. If the earth were flat, people would be able to see a great distance to wherever the edge of the disk is, whatever that means. I would envision something more curved, so if there is such a thing as, quote, flat earth theory, I would think that there'd have to be more of a curved surface than a really flat surface. It would maybe be like part of a very large planet, where that part of the planet that we think of as Earth would be under the dome. Please note that I'm giving my personal view of what flat Earth would be like if it were true. This is not any scientific theory I found. But based on the book of Genesis, I think that the dome would be under a great ocean. Remember that the dome held back from the earth the water outside the dome. The sun could not follow the same path every single day. That's what some people would think, that it's like a pre-programmed, the sun goes and each day it just repeats the same thing day after day. Well, this couldn't be true because we have the change of the seasons, we have the lengthening and shortening of days, and you'd have to account for all of that. The stars in the sky form constellations that do not change. They move around but keep their same positions relative to each other. This implies that there might be an outer dome for the stars and an inner dome for the sun and moon. And how would you account for the movement of the planets? Planets look like stars but seem to move in and out of constellations. The word planet comes from the Greek word planetes, which means wanderer. And we can look at the picture just for an example of Mars, and you can see in one place you'll find Mars near the constellation of Virgo, other times near Libra, and then near the tail of Pisces. So in our conventional view of the Earth as a sphere moving around the sun, it's easy to see why the planets also moving around the sun at different speeds and in smaller or larger orbits would appear to be in different positions in the sky at different times. So flat Earth theory requires that the sun and moon would be in an inner dome and the stars in an outer dome. The planets would also be in the inner dome, moving independent from the stars. But what purpose would this serve? With planets, there's also the problem of retrograde motion. This occurs when the planet seems to move in one direction, then turn around and go in the opposite direction, and then loop back in the same direction. And this happens over weeks or even months of time. So you wouldn't in one night watch, for example, Mars seem to turn and start going the other way and then come back. But as astronomers track the movement of the stars and planets over time, there's this retrograde motion that's happening. The retrograde motion was a problem when the geocentric belief was commonly accepted, a belief that the Earth, as a sphere, was the center of the solar system and even of the universe. This geocentric theory was commonly accepted for more than 2,000 years until the time of the Renaissance. So to explain retrograde motion in the geocentric or Earth-centered solar system, orbits of planets had to have little loops in their orbits, and these loops were called epicycles. Now, in a heliocentric solar system, in other words, a sun-centered solar system, there's no need for planets to turn circles and reverse their directions. It's a much simpler model. Let's look at how retrograde motion can be explained in the solar system in which the planets orbit the sun. And we'll use Mars for an example. In this diagram, we will see how retrograde motion works. The E is the Earth, M is Mars, and at a certain point, Earth seems to catch up to and pass Mars. And let's see what happens as we project how we would be looking at the planet Mars against the background of the stars. Okay, so here we go. The Mars seems to be moving from right to left, and at one point it starts going backwards from left to right, and then once again from right to left. And that's how retrograde motion works. And again, this could last over several weeks or even months. The model in which the planets orbit the sun does not require these epicycles. It's a simpler model. Both the geocentric and heliocentric theories worked. Both explain natural phenomena and predicted events and outcomes accurately. There's a scientific principle known as Occam's razor, which states that when choosing between two theories that both work, the simpler theory is the correct theory. Based on Occam's razor, the sun-centered solar system became the commonly accepted theory. It didn't require all these little epicycles and little things built into the bigger patterns. So if the retrograde motion of planets caused problems for those who held the Earth-centered solar system, it's even more problematic for those who hold a flat Earth belief. Also problematic in the flat Earth theory is the seasons of the year and the longer and shorter days. This might be explained by a disk, which is the Earth, that could tilt back and forth in a yearly cycle. There's also the problem of lunar eclipses, which occur when the Earth as a sphere comes between the sun and the moon. Photos of lunar eclipses clearly show that curved lines rather than a straight line divide the dark from the light portion of the moon, implying that the Earth is a sphere, not a flat disk. Could a flat Earth exist in which all these phenomena, retrograde motion, changing length of days, lunar eclipses, could exist in some type of very complicated situation? The answer is yes, it could be done. But then the next question would be, why? And also, if it were done, it would have to be a very contrived system, much more complex than what our other explanations would violate Occam's razor. You might say, why go through such troubles to build all these little details that seem to really serve no purpose into this system? And the answer is, it would not make sense. So flat Earth theory simply doesn't make sense. You have just heard me seemingly debunk flat Earth theory. But wait, there's one more possibility. And this is completely my own theory, not one that I believe is true, but that I actually believe is possible. Now, there may be others who have also considered the possibility. I don't know. For this theory, I should get an outstanding conspiracy theorist award or maybe a room in the local nut house. But let's try it. What if there's another planet Earth, a real sphere that exists somewhere else? It is in a solar system with the other planets and exists in the universe, in the Milky Way galaxy. Maybe the people had to be taken off of the planet for some reason. So a colony was established on another planet, a huge planet much bigger than the original Earth. The colony was set up and enclosed by a dome under the water of a great ocean. The dome, and probably more than one dome, the dome was arranged to simulate the real planet Earth so that people could continue their lives just as they had been living. They could continue to rely on the sun and moon to mark time. They could continue to have seasons and continue planting and harvesting. But why would people be taken from their original planet to a new planet which simulated the original planet? Well, there's only two possibilities that come to mind. One is because of some disaster, the real planet would become uninhabitable. Or number two, because some people were taken from the real planet Earth to become slaves working over centuries and millennium to build an infrastructure for some other race of creatures that wanted to get free slave labor. And of course, when the work would be done, which is pretty much coming up on now, those who brought the people here would simply destroy them and take over the finished environment. Do you think that humans were brought from our home planet to a simulation of it? I don't believe it's true, but I do believe it's possible, okay? I don't dismiss it, okay? So while I'm not all in with the flat earth theory, I do not completely reject it because of the scenario I just described. So what do you think? Flat earth, you have to now think about it a little bit, okay? Let me know in the comments what you think of my theory, and don't worry about offending me if you want to tell me that I'm crazy. It won't be the first time I've heard it, okay? So thank you for listening and viewing, and God bless all of you. Just a final thought here. I really wasn't sure if I wanted to make this video about flat earth, because before I make a video, I have to ask myself, is this what God would want me to do? And does it serve some greater purpose than just simply, I feel like making a video? Well, the evening before I wanted to make this video, as I was going to bed, looking through my messages and Telegram, I saw this post, and it was titled, "A Crack in the Dome," and then the picture that was taken in Japan. The next morning I woke up, and I see a post, and the very first sentence says, "Mercury retrograde begins." So I thought, okay, this is a confirmation that I need to make the video. And if that weren't enough, I have one more confirmation. And I got that right before I was about to finish the video. A friend of mine sent me an article that he had written. The title was "Ayn Rand Meets William of Ockham," who's the person who coined the term Occam's razor. And so with these three events, I pretty much think that I was supposed to make this video. So I hope that it serves some purpose for you. Thank you.